This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Hello and welcome to The Edge, Trek FM show about Star Trek Discovery. I'm Mike, and today I'm joined by my co-host Brandon. How's it going, Brandon?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Amy will be on in just a little bit to talk about this week's episode 7, Magic Mad Enough to Make the Sanest Man Go Something or Other. I never know what they're talking about with these titles. It's, whatever it is. It's the one with Harry Mudd and the time loop.
I got to ask you a question. Have you recorded the commentary yet?
Yes.
Did you at least once during the commentary use the term Magic Mike?
No, I didn't.
What?
Sorry.
Oh my goodness. I'm so disappointed.
Maybe next time. Maybe next loop. Yeah.
Maybe next loop.
But before Amy and company get into that episode, Brandon and I are going to discuss a little bit of Discovery news. Just like everyone else in the world, we're a week late with this, or maybe even a couple weeks late, but, that's okay. Whatever. We were slacking. Such is life. So, I don't know if you remember this, Brandon, but 2 weeks ago or so, I sent you a message, and I'm like, hey, FYI, Cliff Eidelman is doing a Facebook chat this afternoon where he's talking about his new album, Into the Unknown. And you're like, oh, I have to work. And I'm like, me too. Oh, well.
And then we forgot about
it.
I actually did completely forget about it.
Well, a week or so later, Into the Unknown was released on October 20th, and nobody really paid any attention to it until about a week after that, when, various Star Trek news outlets started posting the contents of that Facebook live chat, in which Cliff Eidelman revealed that Into the Unknown was, in fact, his unused, I guess, themes or test themes or something which he developed for Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
Back when Brian Fuller was still involved.
Yeah, the album, I bought the album on iTunes. It's only 4 tracks. It was $3.96. It's only 8 minutes long, but the cover says Cliff Eidelman Into the Unknown 4 themes. And the 4 tracks play as one 8-minute track, right? But there is some interesting sounds in here. And then you had a little what's the term I'm looking for here? A little homework assignment for me.
Yeah. We'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
The 4 tracks are Into the Unknown, Battle of Two Worlds, Mutiny in Darkness, and Resolve. And, I mean, based on that, Into the Unknown is clearly supposed to be the main title theme music. Battle of Two Worlds, obviously, the battle at the binary stars. Mutiny in Darkness, of course, we've got Burnham's Mutiny, right?
Yep.
And then Resolve, to me at least, really sounds like what would be end credits music, So, yeah, I guess, first off, going back and just thinking about how crazy this is, as Eidelman reveals in that Facebook chat, Brian Fuller, of course, looking for someone to write the music for Discovery, and him, working with Nick Meyer, and him obviously dealing with like Klingon stuff. Meyer is like, hey, how about Cliff Eidelman? And Brian Fuller's like, oh yeah, because he did the music for Star Trek 6 and it's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's hook me up. So Meyer had Eidelman talk to Fuller, and everyone was on board with this, and Fuller asked Eidelman to write a theme. He wrote the theme. Fuller liked it, apparently, because he asked him to write another theme. And according to Eidelman, nothing was signed or anything like that, but he thought that this was definitely going to happen. And it was shortly after that Fuller left the project. Yeah. And when Fuller left the project, they went in a different direction. And, whatever. These things happen, right? It's sort of the way it goes. But I think it's really kind of awesome that Eidelman would release this music, because it really is kind of like a what if thing,
Absolutely. And it's got a very Star Trek sound to it. And like the homework assignment that you put me to was play the Into the Unknown track over the main credit sequence for Discovery, which I did. And I mean, watching it and watching the images that we've come to know over the last 7 episodes, it didn't quite fit for me, but I could hear that it could have been the theme. I mean, I've watched each of the episodes 4 times so far. So, I mean, I've heard Jeff Russo's music, a significant amount of times while watching this new Star Trek series. So to me, that's now the theme for this show. But I can see that this could have been the theme for the show. And moving on to the track of Battle of Two Worlds, like there's a lot of the male choir sound that Cliff Eidelman used in his score for Star Trek 6 that I really like. And that's like Star Trek 6 is my favorite Star Trek movie score. And, hearing that male vocals in this, I can see why they would have wanted to bring him back to voice the Klingons again.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of cool, because when you think about Star Trek 6 in a lot of ways, at least in terms of the original series or whatever, it's kind of, the last episode and sort of the resolution of the conflict with the Klingons, because we know that humans and Klingons are allies in Next Generation. So here, I mean, this is the last, time where they're sort of at odds with each other. Obviously, until, things change in Deep Space Nine and whatnot. But this is the last time where they're at odds with each other before they become friends. And I think that since Discovery, in a lot of ways, is supposed to be sort of like the start of that conflict, it's really kind of cool to ask Eidelman to come in and write that, do the alpha and the omega. And I mean, I'm totally in agreement with you that, Eidelman's score for Star Trek 6 is my favorite score for a Star Trek movie as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Goldsmith on motion picture, I go back and forth with that. I mean, maybe Goldsmith on motion picture is better, but Eidelman, I mean, it's like so crazy, outside of the box, awesome, So, like, when that news came out, I'm like, what? Oh my God, how is this not a thing? And I listened to it right away, and, like you're talking about, like with the theme being lined up with the opening title sequence. I was just kind of playing it, just sort of like thinking about it sort of, just in a kind of an abstract way. But as you start playing it, you're like, wow, like this lines up almost perfectly, like so much so that like, beats come on, in sequence with cuts and everything like that. And the music sort of like crescendos at the same time as Russo's theme and everything like that. I almost wonder, I'm curious, I'd be very curious to know whether or not Eidelman modified his theme once the show came out and he saw the opening title sequence so that it would line up with what existed, or whether that's just some sort of crazy happy coincidence. But either way, I think it's awesome. And, it's one of those weird things where, like, I love Jeff Russo's theme too now, right? When I first heard it, I was like, this is kind of weak. I don't really, I'll
quote you. You use the term weak sauce.
Weak sauce. There you go. But like once I saw it, heard it with the visuals, I was like, oh, this totally works. Obviously, he's writing to picture, and when you hear it in those terms in the proper context, it's awesome, and I really, really love it. And I'm not like taking anything away from the work that Russo has done. I mean, like, you look at some of the stuff. I mean, in the last episode, he had that sort of like disco music as they're jogging. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And something which I didn't pick up on, which he was, I don't know who, someone was talking to him about it on Twitter, about how when they're dancing in this week's episode, the waltz that they're dancing to is basically a waltz version of the disco theme.
Is it?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that stuff so much. And, you hear the stuff that he does on Legion and everything, and you're like, this guy is top notch. I can totally understand why they would get him. But all that being said, there's still a part of me which is just like, what would it have been like if Eidelman had scored this show? Much in the same way that as much as I love Eidelman's score for Star Trek VI, I will never not think, what would it have been like if they used, Holst's The Planets like they really wanted to in Star Trek VI? It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those great what ifs, and you sort of look at that in the larger context of the what ifs of Discovery, and I've been loving Discovery. I really have, and everything about it. But I'm also. I really, really want to go to that alternate timeline in which Brian Fuller stayed on, and we had Edgar Wright direct the pilot, and we had Cliff Eidelman score the soundtrack, and we had Vincenzo Natali as the in-house director and everything, because I want to see what that show is like. This is why I love remakes. I love reinterpretations of things. And, people are always like, Hollywood's out of ideas. Why? It's just a bunch of remakes. It's like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with reinterpretation? I don't know. I'm ranting. But this is another thing that I saw today. Let me just rant a little bit more. And I can't find the tweet now, but some reporter for Birth Movies Death was talking about Stranger Things, and how, like, he was basically saying, like, if the public is so willing to embrace the 80s aesthetic of Stranger Things, how come we can't get Discovery in sort of the Cage retro style? And someone tweeted him or something like that, and it was weird because it was like a protected account or something, but basically a source close to the production or whatever said that was one of the sticking points with CBS. That's what he wanted to do. And I mean, that's
like, what do you mean by that? Like, they wanted to do the retro look, or did not want to do the retro look?
He wanted to do the retro look, and they didn't. And they said
Fuller?
that in this tweet, which I can't find, and which was very cryptic and didn't have like a credited source, so who knows whether or not this is even true, right? But like they were like, oh, see, that's, you can see some of it. You can see some of it hold over, like with the phasers and the communicators, that kind of thing. But like, we've already heard that like he wanted to do something different with the uniforms, and we know that he wouldn't go like full, Star Trek continues with it or anything like that, because we know that he wanted to redesign the Klingons, Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that he would have, tackled it in a way which is very sort of classy and still modern, but with more of that sort of like 60s vibe. And thinking about like all the things, like, it makes sense then that he would want like Edgar Wright to direct it, because I could totally see Edgar Wright getting that fusion and pulling that off, And it's just like,
see,
here's
the thing with Stranger Things, though.
Okay.
Like, the reason why it works with Stranger Things and why I don't think that it would work with Star Trek is, if you were to do that with Star Trek, you're recalling people's nostalgia for one television program. And the thing with Stranger Things is it's recalling people's nostalgia for an era. And, every shot and every plot element in Stranger Things is recalling some other form of entertainment, some other movie, some other book that people remember from that time period. Like just about every shot when I was watching season 1 of Stranger Things, I'm like, that makes me think of this, and that makes me think of this, and that makes me think of this. And they're all different things that it's making me think of. But, if you were to remake Star Trek in a 60s nostalgia, you'd be like, well, that makes me think of TOS. And that's all that would make me think of would be TOS. So that would be going for a completely different type of callback. And I don't think it would work as well as Stranger Things does.
That's quite possible. And, I'm not saying that it necessarily would work better. I think that it's quite possible that the direction that they've gone in here is the right way to do it. But with all this stuff, with, Russo, with, Semmel, with, everyone who's involved and all of the choices which are being made. But I'd like to see what that other thing looked like too, just to see, you know what I mean? Like the example that I keep on thinking of, the example which I will always think of, throughout the history of movies as sort of like the great what if is Moneyball, right? Now you look at Moneyball, I don't know, have you seen Moneyball?
No, but you've talked about it a lot.
I'm sure I have, because it's such a great movie. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite books. And, if you were to tell me, like, Aaron Sorkin is writing a Moneyball movie, and, it's going to star Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, and it's going to be directed by Bennett Miller, I'd be like, oh my God, that sounds like the most amazing thing ever. And then I see that movie, and I'm like, that's the best movie of 2011. That's the best baseball movie of all time. Aside from The Big Lebowski, it may be the best sports movie of all time. Like, this movie is a masterpiece, right? But then you tell me, oh, well, originally it was going to be directed by Steven Soderbergh, and he was going to use all of the original baseball players as themselves, and he was going to shoot it, basically like a pseudo-documentary style and everything. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like the best movie ever made, So it's I'm not trying to take anything away from what's been accomplished with Discovery, which I think is amazing. But I would also love to see this other interpretation of it, just to see what it would be like. That's my whole thing. Which, of course, will never happen. It's just a great what if. But, hearing like this Eidelman music and everything like that, and I'm sure, all the stories and everything will come out over the years, but I like being able to piece together that what if, just like all the other what ifs throughout the history of Trek,
Mm-hmm. And, movie scores themselves, like what we're talking about back at the beginning here, is always a what if. And there's been a lot of times where movies have had scores completely thrown out and had a new score created for it because they ended up wanting to go with something else. Like one of the ones that I find extremely fascinating is, have you ever seen The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy?
No.
I haven't seen it either, but it came out. It was his next film after he did Beverly Hills Cop. And they had started production on the film, The Golden Child, before Beverly Hills Cop went into theaters. And so while it was being produced, all this, fame and attention started to get drawn to him and to Beverly Hills Cop. And John Barry, who had done like these massive, huge symphony scores for, James Bond movies and stuff, had written a score for The Golden Child, but they decided to toss that score out and create a score that was almost like the Harold Faltermeyer, disco type music that was so popular and such a huge part of the success of Beverly Hills Cop. They wanted to try and grab that again, so they completely threw it out and went with something completely different. And La La Land released a 3-disc set that has both versions of the score on it, which is kind of interesting to read up on that and compare.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, you hear about that type of thing every once in a while. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey, prime example of that, an entire score which exists for that movie, which was replaced with classical music. It was the opposite of Star Trek 6, actually.
Yeah.
But, all these what ifs. It's just sort of great to ponder, and to kind of try to piece together and to look and see, like, how did what we get come about? What was the road that was taken in order to get to this place? And I think it's just fascinating, more than anything else,
Well, for the listeners today, if you do like Cliff Eidelman, check out Melodic Treks 55. I did an almost 2-hour episode with Matt Rushing where we talked about his career, and then we did a kind of an in-depth dive into the Star Trek 6 score. It was a really, really fun episode. So that's Melodic Treks 55. And also, I was checking to see if it was up yet, but it wasn't. CliffEidelman.com, he actually writes like a blog on each one of his albums, and he doesn't have one there yet for this new EP, but he's got one for basically every other album he's put out. So if you're interested in some of his thoughts on his music, it's a really good website. So it's just cliffeidelman.com.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And try, put that score up against the visuals for the main title and just see what you think. Because I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's better or not than what we have. It's very different, but it's certainly an interesting what if. Yeah. All right. Well, enough talking about what if. Let's transition over to what is. Brandon and I are going to take off for the time being, but we're going to hand you guys off to Amy to discuss Episode 7, Magic Mad Enough to Make the Sanest... What is it? What is the title?
Magic Mike.
Magic Mike, XXL. Check it out.
Thank you, Mike and Brandon, for our up-to-date news on Discovery. And I'm your host, Amy Nelson, and I've got Ken Tripp with me today. Ken, thank you for coming on again. I guess I didn't scare you off last week, did I?
No, you didn't scare me off at all. I'm excited to be back and talking Discovery because I get the best of both worlds now, Amy. I get to talk about the oldest show and the newest show every week.
Right.
That's right? So it all comes together.
Yep, it's full circle for you.
It certainly is, and it's a lot of fun. Besides, I always like doing shows with you. We have a lot of fun.
We sure do. Well, today we are going to be talking about Episode 7, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. Now, these titles, last week it was one word, and now we're back up to an entire paragraph, it seems like.
Yep. They do go back and forth, don't they? But at least this one fits.
It does. I think all of the titles have been very good. So, well, Ken, why don't you tell us what were your initial thoughts? Like, you just finished watching. What did you think of this Episode 7?
I'm going to talk about the initial thought when it started.
Okay.
And once I realized they were doing a time loop thing, and that was the direction it was going, I said, oh no, don't, please don't do a time. I don't like these shows. Please don't do it. And you know what? It wound up being a really good episode. And it's one of those things that's like First Contact or Star Trek 4. Okay, I really hate time travel because I really do. It drives me crazy. And then they come up with a brilliant episode. So my initial thought was, this is not going to be good. And I was pleasantly surprised it turned out to be really good. I enjoyed it.
Well, talking initial, yeah, when I saw that, I looked straight to my brother and I'm like, all hands, abandon ship. I repeat, all hands. Just cause and effect going through my head. Absolutely huge grin on my face while I was watching it. Just loved it because I love cause and effect. Was one of the first episodes that I ever saw of TNG. So it was very, very good.
Yeah, and Cause and Effect was a great episode, and I was worried that they might follow it too much to the script, but they certainly didn't. They did it their own. It makes you struggle with some of the continuity things, that's all, because time travel was pretty much supposedly discovered in another era, the TOS era. But at any rate, they did a nice job with it. One of the things that comes up a lot, right, we've even got a show, Briar Patch, we've got all these things where we're talking about how the society functions in this make-believe 23rd, 24th century universes, of Star Trek. And you hear all the time a back and forth, like a tennis match. Do they use money? Do they not use money? They say they use money. Then they say, what is money? So we keep going into these circular arguments. But one of the things we are seeing, right, in Discovery in particular, is that there's money involved. We've got Harry Mudd running from creditors. We've got him marrying Stella for her money because her dad is well off, right? And he's an arms dealer, so he's no one to be messed with. Arms dealing in the 23rd century. Crazy. So, people don't get into those lines of work unless there's quote unquote profit to be made. And these are Earth people, human people. So it's not like we're talking other species, Ferengi, all that other stuff. So I just thought it's becoming a little bit more clear as they go back and, I guess, regenerate the history timeline here, that there are some economics that are involved with money and that there is kind of maybe even class warfare going on, Amy. One of the things we heard from the first episode with Harry Mudd, this being the second, was he said that, while Starfleet was up in the stars doing their things, they were forgetting about the little people below. And now their arrogance caused them to be in a war. Kind of an us and them. Very interesting to me.
Well, when I guess I still sort of hold true to the no money situation just because I'm a TNG baby. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, I guess I have a question before I go. So Stella and her father, are they from the Federation? They're not Earth people, are they?
I assume that they were. There's nothing that says either way. It's just an assumption I'm making. But like I said, when you hear arms dealers, when you hear creditors, when you hear running to the Klingons to, and I guess he had some debt that he owed his father-in-law. I have to go back and check that a little bit more. But all I'm hearing is debt that's accumulating through scams and con artistry and arms dealing, all kinds of fraudulent ways to earn quote-unquote money.
Yeah, and so when I hear it, I think, well, that's dealing with other species and other planets and other worlds. So that's sort of how I work it through. But if I think about it, why, you're right, what is the motive? Why does he want to collect all this money? If he's living in the Federation and if there is no money, then what is his purpose? And it doesn't make any sense why he would be doing all of this. Unless he's banned from the Federation and can't come back, and therefore he has to make a living somehow on other worlds. Yeah,
you're right. And, I maybe sometimes your lens is the right one. I may look at things as, in order for there to be a federation, there has to be some sort of commerce. There has to be something that keeps it all together, not just a united federation to keep bad guys out, right? There's got to be ships that are going back and forth. We know there's mining colonies. We know, what are the miners on Dilithium? Why would they have that world or that lifestyle unless they could get very rich? In fact, Harry Mudd in Mudd's Women, the very first episode he was in for TOS was literally, trying to quote unquote sell wives to settlers. Sell, quote unquote, because, and they're rich, and they use the term rich.
Yeah.
So there has to be classes. There has to be.
There does.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out, thank you, Sir Ken, that I did watch Mudd's Women and I Mudd before this recording. So I do have some background knowledge on our lovely Harry here.
One thing you are, and I think it must be the teacher in you, Amy, as you're going to come to these things prepared. You're going to do your homework. So to all of Miss Amy Nelson's students that are listening, and we know they're out there, she does her homework too. It isn't one of those things, do as I say, not as I do, right?
That's right. Oh, and one thing I noticed that since we're talking old TOS, they swore in Mudd's Women twice. They said Jack beep.
They did?
Twice.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah?
And so everyone's all getting upset. I mean, I can imagine the word jackass was not a very friendly term back in the day. That should have... I didn't hear anything. All I heard was Discovery swearing. Well, they've swore a lot, obviously, back... And that was season 1.
Yeah, good call out.
God's women.
Good call out. Yeah. So, like it or not, right? We say Starfleet, military, non-military. You can have all the discussions at the world. One thing they are for sure, they are sailors. And sailors have terrible language. I can tell you that for sure. I can vouch for it, right?
Yes, you can.
Unless your brother somehow plays by a different code. Is he a good guy?
He is. He does not swear, has no tattoos. He's a good sailor.
Oh, that's well, yeah. Well, people would raise their eyebrows at that. Now, I don't have tattoos either, and I don't swear often. But okay, that is. So he's the one guy. That's awesome.
He's the one. Yes.
He's the one guy.
So, still going on with this idea of Harry Mudd, so after watching those 2 episodes and hearing what Kirk calls him, smuggling, and he's buying ships and stealing ships with fake money, again, going back to that money, I thought it was funny that he's traveling without a license and no flight plan. I just laughed at that. But, throughout that, he's the scoundrel and he's the one... And so Kirk calls him out in Mudd's Women and sentence him, basically. And so in TOS, that's his revenge on why he wants to take over the ship. Well, and plus leave that planet of all androids. So that there was some discussion from the fans that it's like, well, going from our frame of reference with TOS, and now we see Harry Mudd in Discovery, where Mudd wants to kill Lorca and murder, where that doesn't seem to be his MO from what we know in TOS. And so is Mudd's reason for revenge realistic here in Discovery when I don't even think it was that realistic in TOS? Like, this whole idea of revenge is so bizarre to me, because I just think, well, is it just saying revenge to create this conflict between characters?
Yeah, his bigger goal, right, was to steal the ship and to sell it. That was his larger goal. And along the way, he's going to take care of Lorca. So, yeah, I'm with you, Amy. It is a trope that's used a lot. And Harry Mudd as a character, he was a dark character, right, when we first met him in the first episode. He really was. And in the first episode of TOS, he was a pretty dark character. And now we're seeing a guy that, he's really ticked off. The how and the why, how he escapes and all that other stuff, it's all a little fuzzy. It's typical Trek. But I do understand that he was left on a prison ship and he's not happy about it. Would a guy who was a snake and working for the Klingons then want to get revenge on a guy that didn't save him too? I mean, you're right. To me, it's a little too much to ask on the revenge piece. They played it well. He was very believable, and his character was a perfect villain, really. And, he had that mix of humor, caustic, he was more than a mustache-twirling villain, but not that much more. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm with you. Is it realistic? I would say it's a stretch.
Yeah, I guess I would because I've seen the motive of our characters that we know and love on Discovery, and I feel like their motives are sincere, like what we see with Burnham, and we're getting to know Lorca's motives. But here we have Harry Mudd, and it's like, okay, he was left on a ship, and now he's going to murder everyone on it just to get the ship and sell it to the Klingons. I don't know. It just seems so weird and unrelatable, I guess, to me. And I wonder if that's because I generally, and I'm not saying this to sound all good, but it's like, I don't have time for revenge. To me, I don't. It's so unrelatable, and I'm like, why is he so angry? And I guess with the money side of it, then it's like, yeah, because there's a lot of people that will do a lot of things and a lot of bad things for money. I think maybe more so than for revenge.
I agree with you. I also don't think that here's the flip side of that. Selling the ship for money. He has no leverage. Okay. When the Klingons show up, what's he going to do? What if they say no? I mean, he's done.
And just take it from him and kill him.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's like, oh, he'll get on a shuttle. Well, he's not going to escape. He's not going to beam anywhere. I don't know if he's going to go back into the whalefish thing or whatever that was. But, it's not going to happen. So both premises are a little weak. I guess when you combine them together, as they say, how did Mr. Scott put it, right? As my granny used to say,
you cannot break a bundle of sticks.
You can't break a stick in a bundle, right?
Yes.
And that's what it is. It kind of puts together that whole thing where it's a little bit stronger. So you have two weak premises coming together to give you a semi-strong premise, but a good story around it.
Yeah. Well, and I really enjoy Rainn Wilson's portrayal of Mudd now that I've seen the original, and his height and his build and all of that, those characteristics. And I think he did a great job with it. And it's a fun story. I just, again, those motives are a little questioning to me.
What's interesting to me too, Amy, is the motives are strange, and it doesn't look like we're going to see him again until the original series. And the way it was played up with him going to the cast premieres and and being brought on as Harry Mudd, I thought he was going to be more of a reoccurring character. I don't get that sense. I guess they could easily bring him back, but it seems like that story arc is done to me. So we'll see.
Well, Harry Mudd was twice on TOS, so maybe twice on Discovery is all we need.
That's right. We'll see. I guess we'll see.
All right. Well, one thing that I really am finding that I just draw to is Burnham's character. And I wanted to talk to you about her willingness to become vulnerable to this crew. And although I love it and I definitely can relate to it and all of her relationships that she has with this crew, and Tyler sort of calls her out as like, well, what's different? And she says, well, on the Shenzhou, I was first officer. So there wasn't any time to build these extracurricular relationships, if you will. So why the change now? Why is she willing to become vulnerable and tell Stamets that she's never been in love before? There could have been a million other secrets that she could have said that would have triggered her and, said, oh, he's telling the truth because only he knows this, you know? So why now is she willing to become vulnerable with this crew?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. It's growth. It's humility. It's her position. The more senior you are in any service, the more fraternization is frowned upon, right? Mm-hmm. 2, when she first came aboard the Shenzhou, she was stoic. She was a Vulcan. It probably took her 7 years just to loosen up to the point where she was at with her captain and the way that she responded and interacted with Saru. But she was still kind of distant, right? But she grew a lot. And you got that just when she was walking through the desert with, what's her name?
Captain Giorgio.
Giorgio. I keep forgetting her name. Not that she was a forgettable character. It's just late. I'm old. Stuff happens. So with Giorgio. So I think that there's a couple of things. Now she is literally an enlisted person on the ship. She is a specialist. She's got no authority. She would be otherwise in jail, rotting away. So she's got a purpose. She has a second chance at redeeming herself, but also experiencing life as it should be lived. So her whole human background was taken away from her when she went to Vulcan. She was raised as a Vulcan. So that's what I see. I just see a person that's got literally nothing to lose and everything to gain. She knows she'll never be, at this point, right? She knows she'll never be more than a quote-unquote specialist. She won't be an officer again. Why not? So I think that, these little adventures, this whole circle thing that she's going through. I just think that she's just in a different position and a different time in her life, and she's willing to open up because she's Starfleet's only mutineer, and outside of that ship, she's not a very popular person. So I think she's just opening herself up a little bit. My guess. I don't know if that's the writer's intent, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that she's very brave to do so and, take that chance on building these new relationships, with Tilly and Stamets and obviously Ash Tyler.
Yeah, he's a cutie, isn't he?
Oh, he is. I'm liking him a little bit more each week.
Oh, are we now, Amy? Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't think you were a fan of facial hair.
Well, that's why I'm, too, myself, am a little surprised. He is growing on me a little bit more. But after, I don't know if you've listened to the notes from The Edge, and Chris talked about it from last week with Lethe. So I'm very curious, because I haven't even asked you this. Do you think that Ash Tyler is Vogue?
No, I do not. I do
Okay.
not. And maybe it's more of a wish that I hope he's not. But I don't. I didn't from the beginning. I started to get a little suspicious, but it would really be a stretch. And if they pull that cord, if they tug in that direction, I will be very disappointed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe, but I'm going with no myself. And I guess I wouldn't be too disappointed. I don't think I would be as disappointed as you if they did pull that. But I hope that he's not. And I don't think that he is. I think there's a lot of the listeners, I do postcards, and so I'm reading what everyone has to say. Like the height differential, Vogue was short. And here, as we noted from this episode, Tyler is very tall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking, well, could they have extended his legs? I mean, I don't know.
Well, you know what it is? It's funny because, it's not like there weren't human spies, in TOS, right? Trouble with Tribbles. We had a Klingon who was human. Was disguised as a human, so it's not far-fetched. I'm just thinking that it would be a real stretch to take somebody who was an absolute outcast on Klingon, as a Klingon, somehow transform him to be this eloquent, this open. And the only thing they could really have done, I think, to make sense would be is they took a prisoner and they swapped Katras or souls or whatever, or they removed one essence and put in the other, and you still have a combination of the two. And those things I just don't like. And that's why I'm hoping that, and you know what, there's so much attempt at trying to make things as dramatic as possible. It is okay to tell a good story, to enjoy the story, to have some tension or whatever, without always trying to, just go way out there and try to put the audience at, oh, what's happening here? What's happening there? I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of that stuff, and I never have been. And it's not that I don't like suspense and I don't like some essence of mysteries. I don't like things that really stretch you to think one way or the other. So if it's going to be a big, disappointing, heartbreaking thing, I'm not going to be a big fan of it. Mm-hmm. That's my guess.
And I'm with you. And I think that the story in and of itself of Burnham and Tyler coming together and taking a risk on a relationship is a great story. And we don't need to embellish it anymore with Tyler being Vogue or anything.
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm. The one thing that is interesting to me is that obviously he was treated differently on the prison ship, and was used by that Klingon captain. He
Correct.
does not seem to have any effects whatsoever from that or any of the early torture things. That's the only thing that doesn't make a lot of sense. And they do point that out a lot in the episode. They say, well, for a person who's been through a lot, you seem remarkably stable. And you look at Lorca, who's the opposite, So I think that's kind of interesting. Oh, and one other thing, since we were talking last week, and I hadn't thought about this, but we know when Lorca goes crazy on the Admiral, and she says, you really need help or whatnot, we still don't know how much torture he received on that ship. and if that's what really pushed him over the edge. You know, if he really went, you know, bat bleep crazy after being on the prison ship, maybe that was the final straw. We always talk back to the incident, but we forget about that.
Yeah. Well, and plus we learn a little bit more that he doesn't want Discovery to have the same fate as his previous ship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, like, and I was really surprised by that. And I was like, is he saying that just to, you know, try and trick Mudd into getting rid of his crystals on his wrist so it doesn't reset time? Or is he being sincere? Again, with this Lorca, I'm questioning everything that he says because at face value, it sounds great. Like, yeah, I don't want this to happen to my ship. I'm going to give you what you want. But then I think about it and I'm like, oh, darn him. I'm questioning his motives and what he is still.
I know.
And we're episode 7.
Yeah. And he seemed pretty stable in this episode, right? I mean, sitting in the captain's chair. And, you know, it's funny because as we were watching this Sunday night, my wife's not a big fan, but, you know, she's and, you know,
she's trudging along with you.
Well, yeah, a little. And when that point where he was like, well, just beam that fish into the shuttle bay or whatever he says, cargo bay. And Saru starts to correct him and he gives him that look or whatever. My wife just went, oh my God, that is so you. And she's so right. That is me. You know, if my intention is clear, I don't like to be corrected like that. It's like, just do it. You know, you don't have to. If I say a whale's a fish, I mean, just get the thing on board. I know it's a mammal, right? And it was just thought I'd share a little inside there, but it was funny. And so because of that, I found him very relatable because his mannerisms are like spot on. I was like, okay, yeah, he's normal, or at least because I think I'm normal, so he must be normal.
Well, that is debatable there, sir.
Well, yes, you know what they say, right? That in every family is a crazy relative, and if you don't know who it is, it's you.
It's you. Yeah, I thought he was very, relatable, just like, okay, here's this issue. Take care of it. I don't need to know about the details. Again, and in my opinion, like showing trust in his officers to handle the situation. I mean, it seems minor on the outset, so just take care of it. Don't bore me with the details of what this is and stuff like that. So it was good.
Did you pick up the other piece, though? There's a small other piece in that I don't know if it means anything because it's Star Trek and we don't know if the writers are doing things intentionally or if they're just trying to make things flow. But as soon as they said it was Starfleet regulation, he immediately said, do it, right? Here's a guy up to this point who could give a rat's you-know-what about following regulations. This is all about getting the ship where it needs to go, fighting the battles, doing what he's supposed to do. So at the end of last week, before he goes off chasing down that admiral, reach out to Starfleet, make sure we're doing it right. And then in this episode, Starfleet regulations. You're right. These are regulations. Okay, beam that fish aboard or whatever it was. So just interesting to me where I'm starting to see that little change. I don't know what's causing that change, but he is thinking differently.
Yeah. Did Admiral Cornwell really get to him and scare him straight into saying, okay, I need to really take these orders and a bit more seriously.
Yeah, because she's saying you're making a lot of decisions that are making it difficult to keep you in that chair. And, he's playing it straight. And he played it about as straight as you could play. You knew he had no interest. He had no interest.
Exactly.
I was like, yeah, whatever.
Because it was not going to affect the war in any way.
Or him, or whatever.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, okay, we'll see. We still don't know what happened to the thing. But anyway, I guess that's another story. We talk about, the of taking care of Ripper and all this other stuff. And this poor thing had a ship stuck in its belly. And we really don't know what happens to it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because by the time we get to that 20, whatever it was, the 200th timeline loop doesn't even get brought up, right? They're getting into the fix.
Well, I do believe one of the listeners posted on the Babel conference saying that it was 53 times, and we saw 6 of them. So 53 minus 6 is 47.
Yeah, I know. See, that's me in the details, Amy. Now you're getting the Captain
Oh,
Lorca
yeah,
look.
okay.
Like, okay, you knew what the
Next.
intent was, right? Yeah, okay. It's not a fish.
All right. Well, I want to know, do you like the idea of Michael Burnham and Ash Tyler together? Do you think there's a future there? Because I'm going to go first on this one. So when we saw 2 weeks ago and Ash Tyler kicks the chair out with his foot, I was like, what is that? What does that mean? That's sort of flirty. And so I was talking with a good friend, Nick, and I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, oh, it's nothing. And so then this whole week I'm thinking, oh, well, it's nothing. There's not anything there. Well, hello, there's something there this week, obviously, because they end up dancing and kissing and stuff like this. So I don't know how I feel about Ash Tyler and Michael Burnham getting together romantically. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I think it's one of two things, Amy. Well, three. Okay, one, it's a nice relationship, and they have to deal with it as she comes up in the ranks and things change or move. Two, he gets killed, and it's huge heartbreak for her, and she has to recover from that, and we have to go down that journey. Or three, he's a bad guy.
Journey.
Yeah, or three, he's a bad guy, right? So there's only...
Yeah, I don't want to go down that journey. See, I don't want to go down any of those journeys.
I'm with you. I am not a fan of that stuff. I am not a fan. I'm just saying I think those are where I see the directions going a lot. And, it's funny. I'm not a big relationship guy either when it comes to these things. To me, it's like, oh, it's getting in the way. And it doesn't matter if it's Star Trek or whatever it is. I'm like, oh, give me the remote. I'm just... and it's not like I'm insensitive or whatever. I'm actually very sensitive at times, but there are just it's been done so many times. I want to see the adventure. I want to get into it. The relationships piece of any of this stuff, so you care about the characters are as important.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into, okay, here's where has that ever been successful?
Right.
In a TV show.
Yeah.
Right, where it's okay, this has made the show better. And every time it's gone, oh no, why did they do that? Why did they pair them off? It really struggles to work.
Yeah. It's interesting because I say that I don't want to see Burnham and Tyler, but I would have really enjoyed to see Lorca and Cornwell. I want to see more of that.
You want to see more of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that weird? Well, it's weird to me because I usually, just give me the action and the technobabble. But I sort of want to see how that plays out. I think because I want to see more how Lorca is going to handle that situation.
Yeah, I agree. Because they had the relationship, obviously, and that's really probably what's kept him in command. I'm sure a lot of it had to do with his capabilities, but he did have a pretty strong aggregate at the flag level. So that doesn't hurt. So we know they had it. It looks like it's
that's what I like
broken.
about it.
Yeah. They had it. We're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
I don't mind that at all. Because then the backstory becomes intriguing because you don't have to go through it. You're being told what happened rather than having to live through it. So I'm with you. I'm with you.
All right.
Amy, we're agreeing on stuff tonight.
I know.
We're having some fun.
So tell me, what did you think about the disco party on the Discovery?
It was fun. It was really fun. I liked it because I guess it's tangible. We listen to symphony music that was written hundreds of years ago. We go to the opera. It's not like everything. We read books. Books have been around a long time. We horseback ride. We do things that have been going on for centuries. To pull it all back and see it on the ship, I think. I'm guessing that's the Nick Meyer quality of this show, where he tries to bring in relevance and say, well, why would this necessarily change? Right. And that circles back kind of to the Trekonomics and the class warfare and all that other stuff. Well, why in 200 years would we change, from an economic society? I think the society itself is getting better, right? I mean, we see that in our own century. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is, there's still going to be people that are greedy. Not everybody's going to, and I know I tease TNG, but I love TNG. But it was always interesting to me that the music and the stuff they always listened to was, very, very proper and, very formal. And, they did Shakespearean plays. And they did that in TOS as well. And that gave it a common frame of reference. What they did in Discovery was just, say, hey, we're going to party. We're going to have some fun. We're going to play with the disco name. I mean, they had Stayin' Alive playing. I thought it was great. I thought it was great because unlike stuff from 2 or 3 centuries ago from our time, there's nothing recorded. There's nothing you can pull from. Well, there certainly will be in a couple of 100 years. All this stuff, if we don't screw it up, we'll still be there for them to download and see. I mean, they're going to have historical records from news briefs and live reports and stuff. All the things that we don't have from that same time frame. So why not pull it in and have some fun with it?
They're going to have all these podcasts to pull from.
Yes. Yes. We are now immortal.
Yes. So I wanted to know, when was the last time you attended an 80s party?
Probably in the 80s.
And really?
I'm
you
that
haven't
old.
been to one since?
No, I haven't
Oh my
I haven't
gosh.
been to an 80s party or a 70s party.
Oh, okay.
But I've been
to, a
to
70s
parties in the
party.
70s and 80s, Amy. I mean, I don't know.
No, I'm talking about this
I know.
this decade.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, no, I recently, and I say recently, within the past 5 years, I went to a 70s party, and that was so much fun. Crazy big bell bottoms, and you just enjoy and celebrate that time period. And I, within the last 10 years, have been to an 80s party, again, because that's sort of my era, our era. And so I can totally relate that it's okay, they're going to have a themed party. I mean, there's so many themed parties out there that it made sense to me.
Like I said, I think they play with the name, which is great. I'm sure they know what disco was and is. And I thought it was beautiful. And yeah, I thought it was fine. I like seeing things that make it very relatable and that our history had something, I don't know if 1970s era dancing or outfits is something you want to pull in because it's already pretty outdated, but it is fun and it's funny, right? And that was the idea. So I'm with you, Amy, and I knew what you were talking about. If I was invited to such a thing, would I go? Sure, but it's one, I grew up in that era. Two, you've seen my iPod. So you know where I live when it comes to music and stuff. Yes.
Yes. Oh, well, we just might have to maybe do a little 70s party. We've got a lot of people coming down to Star Trek Las Vegas, so. All right. Well, is there anything else that we are missing from this episode?
That we are missing? I don't think we're missing anything. We go through a constant loop that ends perfectly. That has Stella saying the very first words to Harry Mudd that she says in Mudd's I Mudd, hardcore Fenton Mudd, what have you been up to? I thought that was great. That was pointed out by one of our Babel Conference listeners, by the way. So I appreciate that because
and now I get it because I just saw the episode.
And
okay.
At the end of it, So that was kind of neat, and I think it put a nice button on Harry Mudd and where it's going. It didn't move too much the plot of the overall anthology that we're going through. I mean, a little bit. It just gave us more to question about with Lorca and things of that nature. But it was the right episode at the right time. It was the heavy. Throw a Star Trek 4, and we can go back to heavy now.
Yeah. You're so funny, Star Trek 4. Heavy. Throw a cause and effect, and then
Well, cause and effect was a great episode, but it wasn't a funny episode. I mean, it wasn't light.
No. But it was episodic, and I really enjoyed that about this episode because I like that.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you again.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
Stop the presses. Well, Ken, it's been fun talking about magic to make the sanest man go mad. Or should we say mud? Ha ha. But that isn't the only thing we've been discussing on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Literary Treks.
The hardest thing I've ever done, I mean, as a tie-in writer, reconciling canonical differences or apparent canonical differences is one of those things where as a tie-in writer, you learn, you see it, and instead of getting angry about it the way a fan does, you look at it and you go, oh, that's a story possibility. How do I explain that? What do I do with that?
The 602 Club.
I don't know. There's just something completely different about this movie than anything I've seen this year and maybe in a long time. And maybe it's just, I feel like this movie just takes the time to do all of that stuff. And it's not afraid to be art.
Warp 5.
And good to know that you have already failed one of my questions for Something Geek. There's 5 Xindi that are still alive and 1 species that's extinct.
He's not that bright.
I'm going to jot that down. I thought there were 8. I've always thought there were 8. See, it was confusing. I'm confused.
To the journey!
I kind of figured he would just be able to, like, make another mobile emitter for the Doctor. Wouldn't he?
He'd use his nanoprobes for that.
Yeah.
Right, put some nanoprobes on the job, they'll make the Doctor a new mobile emitter.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Lickety-split.
Can I have my mobile emitter? Oh, yeah. He never asked, though, did he?
No, he didn't.
If he'd asked him, he'd just been like, oh, yeah, here you go.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review, because that really helps other listeners to find our show and listen.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Speaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party applications. You can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. However, the best place is on the Babel Conference. That's our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it will come right up.
And if you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select the Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Amy, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Well, you can find me here on the network. I do a little mini Edge show called Postcards from the Edge. I am also a host on Earl Grey with Justin Ozer and Richard Marquez, and that's obviously covering the next generation. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but my favorite place is on the Babel Conference, so you can find me there. Ken, where can people contact you?
Well, you can contact me also through the Babel Conference. I'm going to pick it up where you left off because that's where I am, and I try to communicate and tease my other hosts on the other shows as much as I possibly can. Yes, I have a good time on there. You can hear me on Standard Orbit with my good friend Zach Moore. Yes, Zach is back, folks. We've got 2 episodes in the can now, and we're continuing to carry on there. So Standard Orbit, please listen to us. We miss you guys. And also, you can find me on Twitter at BostonSCPO.
Yes, it's so glad to have you guys back together on Standard Orbit. It's great. So if you'd like to keep all of our shows coming to you each week, please consider becoming a patron of the network on Patreon. You can visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. You've got some great perks at the $5 level. You can get into our patron zone, which gives you exclusive content and early access to our shows. At the $15 level, you can join our roundtable discussion, and that's where you get to hop on with the hosts of the network and chat once a month about Star Trek. And at the $25 level, you can become an associate producer of any show that you choose. And again, you can find all those details at patreon.com/TrekFM. And we'd like to take this moment to thank our associate producers of The Edge. That's Norman Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, and Richard Rutledge. Thank you so much for supporting The Edge and the network. So Ken, thank you so much for coming on The Edge this week. I love having you on and love talking Star Trek with you.
Oh, my pleasure, Amy. It is always fun talking with you about Star Trek and any other thing. We're having a good time on this network, folks. I hope it resonates with our listeners. I guess the great chemistry amongst all the hosts. So, and I think the one with you has been really special and a lot of fun. So thanks for having me back-to-back weeks, Amy.
Thank you. Well, listeners, join us next week for another episode of The Edge.